Today, you are going to build an application using Next.js and Tailwind CSS. We're going to build a Movie Explorer app, and this is the finished project here in which a user can search for movies here. And I'm going to click search, and then they can see a nice kind of grid of movies. And every once in a while for this API, the movie doesn't actually have the image icon, but for the most part, it works pretty well. So I can also do like Die Hard, and then you can see the different movies here. Then you can click on a movie. You can see this nice little modal pop-ups here for the different movies. And then we also have the ability to see now playing popular, top-rated, upcoming movies. So we can click on all these, and then we can see these all displayed as well. So we're going to build and deploy this website. You can see this is a public URL here using Next.js as well as Tailwind CSS. So without further ado, let's get to building this application. So here in VS Code, the first thing that we are going to do is run the command npx create -next-app at latest. So we're going to template out this new app. I'm going to call this Movie Explorer. We're not going to use TypeScript. We're not going to use ESLint. We are going to use Tailwind. We're not going to use SRC, and we are going to use the app router. And then I'm not going to customize the default import alias. And then it's going to create this project here. And then once it's done, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go File, Open, and then open this project within VS Code. So now that I have this project open up, the first place we're going to go is just to our home page. So within our app folder, we're going to go to our page.js, which is going to be our home page. Now I'm going to rename this to BJSX. I get better code completion, and I like this React icon a little bit better than the JS icon. But now that we're in here, we're going to kind of just skeleton out the home page here. So what I'm thinking is that this home page is going to be super simple. I just want it to have maybe like an H1 that says the name of our application, Movie Explorer. And then also I'll do just a search input to where the user can search for a movie. And then once they click to search for the movie, we will make an API request to our API that we're going to use for this application, which I'll explain in a sec. And that will basically return a list of movies that they can see that are related to the search term that they input. So before we do that, let me actually go over, and for my layout.js file here within my root, instead of making this title create next app, let's just name it Movie Explorer. And then for the description, I will put, I don't know, your one-stop shop for seeing upcoming, now playing, top rated, and all movie related stuff. I don't know. That's not a great description. You could probably come up with something better there. But now that we've updated that, let's go back to this page.jsx and let's start kind of templating out just what I want for our HTML here. So I'm going to actually go ahead and remove all of this, and I will be providing all of the styles for you. So you can go to my GitHub project, the finished project that will be linked below, and feel free to copy and paste the styles here. But if you also want to kind of give a try here of building out just a page here that has a title of Movie Explorer, and then it has a form in which it has an input that the user can type in a search query, and then it should have a button with type submit that will submit the form and call a handle submit function. Go ahead and try to implement that, as I'm going to kind of do that right now. But you know, if my implementation is a little bit different, don't worry about it. It is important to, you know, get some practice doing it. If you are like at the very beginning, maybe watch me do this first, and then once you see me do it, and then maybe go kind of do it yourself. But we're just going to template out kind of the HTML here. So I'm just going to do a wrapper div, and then within that div, I'm also do a main tag. And then within the main, we're just going to do an H1 with Movie Explorer as the text. And then below this H1, we'll do a form. We're not going to do an action here for it. We are actually just going to do a on submit. And then that is going to equal handle search. And then we are going to have a function for handling search in which we're going to implement here. And I'm going to say function handle search. And you could also do an arrow function if you would like. And it's going to take an event. But I'm going to also make sure to make this an async function because we are going to await something within this function, which we'll cover here in a sec. But I'm first going to do event.prevent default. So it's going to prevent the kind of default submission of this form. And then we're going to do some more stuff here, like some asynchronous stuff. But right now, let's finish kind of skeleting out this form component here. So we have the on submit. I'll add a couple styles here in a second. But now we need to add the input. So this is just going to be an input. It is going to be of type text. Now I am going to put these all on separate lines here. So for this input, we do want to make this a controlled component. So I'm going to actually set the value. It's going to be equal to a query. But now we need to create the state for this. So I'm going to be using state. We're also going to be using handle clicks here. So this is going to be a client component. And actually for most of our components within this application, they are going to be kind of client components here. We're not going to be doing too much with server components. But at the top of this function, I'm going to say const query, comma set query is equal to use state. And then we're going to initialize this to an empty string, but I need to import use state from React. And then we set the value to be the query. And then we're going to say on change. We're going to capture the event. And then we are going to set the query to event.target.value. So when this input changes, it's going to take an event, and then we're going to set our query state to whatever the user types into this input. And we'll also set a placeholder, and this will just be search for movies, ... And then I'll add some styles here in a second, but let's do a button in which we have a type of submit. So when they click on this button, it's going to call this handle search function. And then I'm just going to say that this is search. And that is really it for our form. Now, we are going to eventually have a component right here that is going to render out our movies. So this is going to be like a movie grid component that renders those movies out. We are also going to add a modal here that is going to be used when we click on a movie. It's going to pop up a modal that shows us more details about that movie. But we're not going to implement those just yet. But if you go to copy and paste the styles here from my GitHub, you're going to see that I have a movie grid component here, as well as a modal component. You can ignore those for now. We're just first going to set up this page and add some functionality to it. And then we will eventually add our movie grid as well as this modal here. But for now, this is kind of the HTML here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the styles that I've already written here. You can do so as well, or you can ask ChatGPT to style this HTML for you, and that should also work. Or you can just, practice your Tailwind CSS and style it yourself. I do have a full course on Tailwind CSS if none of this makes sense to you, which might be good to do at some point. But if you want to practice your styling, go ahead and do that. If you want to, use ChatGPT or copy mine, you can go ahead and do that now, as I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this now as well. So I copied and pasted this in, and then if you did so as well, like I said, you'll see a movie grid and modal component. Just make sure that you have those commented out for now so we don't get an error. But now I think this should have us set up pretty well. So I'm going to run npm run dev in my terminal, and then we're going to go over to localhost 3000 here, and I'm going to refresh this page, and we should see just a basic kind of a layout of this component. So this looks good, but now we need to add the functionality for when they search for a movie here. So like if they search for John Wick and they click search, they should see like a list of movies. So let's first implement that request to our movie API. And then we will work on building out the movie grid component as well as the modal to where when they click on a movie, it kind of pops out the grid, like I probably showed you in the intro of this video. Let's actually head over here to this API. So this is a free API called developer.themoviedb.org, and I am at /docs. So go ahead and go to this URL. Now I've already created an account. You do have to like submit a request to use their API to get an API key, but it's totally free. You don't have to put in any credit card information. You do have to put in your email and phone and stuff like that, but honestly, you could probably put in a fake email and phone if you want to. It immediately will give you the API key after you just request access to it. So go ahead and fill that stuff out, put whatever information you're comfortable with. And then once you do that, make sure that you can get signed into this site and then come to developer.themoviedb.org. And then once you see this page, basically all we're going to do here is we're going to get the API key. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to API reference and I'm going to make sure to like delete my account after this. So you can't see like all of my API keys and stuff like that. Or maybe this time around, I'll actually just blur this line out. I'll see what I decide to do here. Maybe I'll just blur it out for this time around. But once you click on API reference here, so I'm at reference intro getting started, and I'm on Node.js, I want you to go over here to access token, but then I want you to click on it and then switch it to API key. And now we have this API key that we need. So I want you to copy this. And then once copied, I want you to head back to VS Code. And what we're going to do here is in the root of our project. So on the same level as our app here, and on the same level as our next config and package.json, I'm going to go new file. And this is going to be a .env.local file. All right, so it's on the same level as get-ignore, next.config.js, so on and so forth. And what I'm going to do here for this env variable is I'm going to do next public API key. And then now I'm going to set it to equal, and I'm going to set it to equal the API key that I just copied from that movie database organization. So I'm going to paste it in here. I'm not going to show you it, but I'm going to paste in my API key to set it to this environment variable. So I just pasted that environment variable in here to .env.local, and I closed my page. So make sure to do that there, but that is really all we're going to have to do to set up our connection to our database here. So now that we have that in place, we need to basically handle this handle search function. So to do this, what I should do is first, I'm going to check, well, if they didn't, or they don't have a query, like if it's still just an empty string, then I don't want to make a search request. I'm just going to do an early return here. All right, so they need to put in text for us to make an API request. But then we can say const results is equal to await, and then I'm going to do search movies and pass in my query. So now we need to implement the search movies function. So up here above my component, I'm going to do async function search movies, and it's going to accept a query. And then here we're going to do try. So we'll put it in a try catch block, and I'll say const response is equal to await. And this is where we're going to make a fetch request to our API. Now, if you want to try to figure this out on your own using that moviedb.org documentation, I think that would be really good practice for you. But we're going to kind of go ahead and do this now here. So the first thing I'm actually going to do here is we're going to use a constant, a base URL. So what I'm going to do here is within my app directory, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call this constants.js. And then here, I'm going to export const base URL, and I'm going to set that to equal the base URL that we are going to be making this request to. And in this case, it's going to just be https://api.themoviedb.org/3 because they are on version number 3. So I'm going to export this base URL. And then within this page here, the first part of my fetch request is just going to be this base URL. So I'm going to use JavaScript backticks here to create a template literal. And then I'm going to do $curly brace base URL, import that from my constants. And then the rest of this is going to be /search/movie. And then we're going to do $API_key. And then what is this going to equal? Well, it's going to equal $curly braces, our process.env. And it's going to be our next public API key. So next public API_key. So we need to add our API key to this request. And then for our search query here, we need to do a and sign. So I'm going to do and. We're going to set the query is equal to $curly brace because we're going to enter JavaScript's land here. And it's going to be encode URI component. And then we are going to pass in our query. So this is going to encode the query or this URL here and pass in our query and make a request to this movie database. And then if that is successful, we just need to return await response.json because we need to convert it to JSON. But if there is an error, we're going to catch that error. And then what we're going to do is just console.error. And I'm going to say error fetching data in search movies and then pass in our error. And then we'll return an empty array. So this search movies makes a fetch request based on the user's query to that API that we just showed you here. Now that we have that in place, we can now set some movie state. So what we want to do is say const movies, set movies is equal to use state. And then I'm going to pass in an empty array. And then once we get our search results here, then we need to set our state. So I'm going to set movies, and it's going to be our results, and then it's going to be .results. Because this search movies API, it returns our results as an object, but it returns them on a results property. So we're going to set our movies to results.results here. We then have the data we need to then render out our movie grid. But before we do that, let's just console.log our movies here and see if we are returning a set of movies from our API. So let's go back to localhost. I'm going to refresh here for good measure. And then let's search John Wick. I'm going to click search. So I don't see anything happen, which is expected, but let's go to the console here and I see I have some objects. So for movies, you can see that I do indeed have a movies array that is a bunch of different movies. And you can see it has a popularity score, an overview, a title. It even has some of them have a video and all this sort of stuff. So pretty dang cool. We have successfully made a request to go get John Wick movies from our API. So now we need a way to kind of display our movies to the user after they search for them here. So we're going to come back, and what we're going to do is I'm going to create a component that is going to be this movie grid. So I'm going to go within my app folder. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this components. And then within this components folder, I'm going to create a component called movie grid.jsx. For this component, it's basically just going to be a grid that renders out a bunch of different movies. So we're going to export a default function, and this is actually going to be a server component here, movie grid, and it's going to accept movies. And then we are going to allow the user to click on a movie, and that's going to display a modal. So for now, we are going to put in a handle movie click function, but I'll kind of show you what we want to do with that here in a second. Let's go ahead and say if not movies dot length. If we don't pass any movies into this movie grid, I just want to return null. But if we do have movies, then we want to return, well, we're going to return a wrapper div, and we'll put some styles on this in a second. But we just really want to map over our movies and display a movie. So I'm going to do movies.map. We're going to accept a movie in this function. And then we're going to do a return here. So notice I did parentheses and not curly braces here. So it's going to do an implicit return. And I'm going to return, it's actually going to be a movie card. So we're going to create another component here. But it's going to be a movie card in which the key is going to be our movie.id. And then the movie, well, that is just going to be our movie. And then we are also going to pass an onClick, which is going to be our handle movie click function that we also pass as a prop. And then I'm going to close this component. So for all of our movies, we're going to render this movie grid that is going to render a movie card for each movie. And each movie card is going to accept a movie prop as well as an onClick prop. Now I am going to add some styles to this div here, and you can, of course, copy and paste these or use any strategies that I explained earlier. But let me go ahead and grab those and paste them in here. So it basically just creates a grid for our movie grid. But now that we have this in place, we need to implement our movie card. So let's create another component here, and it's just going to be movie card.jsx. And since we're going to handle a onClick on the movies, we are going to make this a client component. And then what we're going to do here is export a default function called movie card, and it's going to accept our movie as well as our onClick props that we just passed from our movie grid. And then what we're going to do here is a couple of things at the top of this file. So each movie is going to have a image URL because we want to represent an image for every movie. So I'm going to do const image URL is equal to backticks, and then what the URL is going to be is https://image.tmdb.org/t/p/w500. I know this sounds crazy. And then $ curly brace movie.poster_path. So every movie is going to have and not post path, it's going to be poster path. But every movie is going to have this poster path, and then this database, it's going to also contain a kind of URL or a database of movie posters or images, and we can prefix it with this prefix here, and then just set it to the poster path. And this is going to give us an image URL for every movie. And then we also want to say const truncated title, because every movie is going to have a different kind of length of title. And if the title is too long, it's going to make our page look kind of gross. So we want to actually truncate that title. So every truncated title is actually going to be movie.title.length is greater than, and let's go ahead and say, like, if it's greater than 25, we'll truncate it. So greater than 25 question mark. Then we're going to do movie.title.substring. We're going to slice this substring from 0 to 25 here. And then what we're going to do is plus ... else. If it's not greater than 20, we'll just do movie.title. So if the movie title is greater than 25 characters, we're just going to split it to the 25 characters, and then we're going to add ... So it's going to be most of the title just plus ... saying there is a little bit more of the title, but they'll get the gist. But if that's not true, if it's less than 25 characters or 25 characters or less, we'll just do the movie title. So that should lead to more consistent styling here. And then we can return a wrapper div in which when they click on this div, we will call our onClick function. But then within this div, we're going to do another div here. And this is where we're going to render out our image. And it's going to be a next image here. And we're going to set the src is equal to our image URL. And then our alt is going to be our movie. Actually, it's just going to be our truncated title is what we'll set for the alt. And then our layout, we're going to set it to be responsive. And then for our width, we're going to set our width to be 128 because we want all these cards to have a very similar styling to them because all these images are not the same size. So we're going to set the width and height to be the same. We're going to set the object fit to cover, and then we're going to set a class name here to rounded-md, a Tailwind class. And then we're going to make sure to close this component. And then below this div is where we're going to do an H3, and this is just going to be our truncated title. So you see this movie card, it's really not showing that much information, which is why when they click on this movie card, we're also going to show a modal that pops up and shows them additional information. So I'm going to go ahead and to this wrapper div, I'm going to add just a single style here. So it's going to be class name is cursor pointer. And then for the inner div, we're going to add just a couple of styles here as well, which is going to be making it relative and setting width and height. And then for my H3, we're also just going to add a few styles here to it, in which we're going to set the text to white and the text to large. So now we have our movie card components that render out the movie image as well as the title of the movie within our movie grid. And then within our movie grid, we're going to set a movie card and import that movie card. So now within our page.jsx, we should be able to render a movie grid here that has a movies prop and a handle movie click prop. But we're not going to implement the handle movie click prop yet because we'll implement our modal before we do that. So here, let's go ahead and render our movie grid component, and then we're going to pass it a movies prop, setting it to movies. And then the prop that we're also going to send is handle movie click. I'm going to copy this, handle movie click. And then for now, we're just going to set it to be a function that returns null. Well, we will implement this here in just a second. And I'm going to remove my movies here. So if I didn't mess anything up there, which I'm not sure I would expect, let's go ahead and type in John Wick and then click search. And then what we see is invalid src prop on next image. Image.tmdb.org is not configured under images in your next config. And that is correct. I actually forgot to do this. So let's come back and go to our next config. So we need to basically tell Next.js that, hey, it's okay to get images from this remote source. which we are doing from our movie database. We're getting that like movie path name here in our movie card. We're getting these from a remote source. So in our next config, we need to set up an images property. And then we need to set like what are proper remote patterns that we can use. So we need to set a remote patterns property, and that is going to be an array of remote patterns. And then within the array, we're going to pass in objects that basically set the protocol and host name that is going to be okay for us to get remote images from. So for this object, we're going to set a protocol, and then the protocol that we use is HTTPS, and then the host name is going to be hostname, and this is going to be a string that is image.tmdb.org, because that is what matches our protocol here, HTTPS, and then our host name, tmbd.org. All right, or image.tmdb.org. So now that we have that, I'm going to go back to our page here, and we should be able to refresh this here and then search for John Wick again, and then click search. And you do indeed see, I now see all these John Wick movies. So John Wick Chapter 4, I have seen that. I do actually kind of like John Wick movies. I mostly like Keanu Reeves, but I mean, you kind of know what you're getting with these movies, but I do kind of like them. And then you see we get several different responses for these John Wick movies. So pretty cool. And I think these styles look okay here. Like they're not, crazy great, but they're also definitely not super bad. And I also want to add, like for this movie Explorer, I want to add a little bit more margin here. So I'm going to do M-4. And we see it gives it a little bit more spacing here. And then maybe around this form here as well, it has MT8. What if I just do M8 and give it some more margin overall? And I think that actually looks pretty good. That kind of implements this homepage. But what I want to do here is when I click on a movie, I want to pop out a modal that shows more movie details. So let's go ahead here and let's go and create a modal component within VS Code. So within our components, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this modal.jsx. And this is also going to be a client component because they should be able to click on the modal to close the modal. So I'm going to say use client, and then below this, I'm going to export a default function, and it's going to be called modal, and it's going to accept a movie as well as an on-close, not on-clock function, on-close function. I'm going to say if they don't have a movie, then just return null. So just a quick check there. But then for this modal, what we're going to do is return, and this is mostly going to be kind of like styles here. It's going to be a wrapper div, and I'll add styles in a second. Within that div, we'll do another div, and then we'll do an H2 below this div. And this H2 is going to have our movie.title, and we'll just use the full title. And then below that, we'll do a paragraph tag, and this paragraph tag is going to have a movie.overview. And then below this paragraph tag, we're going to do another div. And then we're going to do a few different paragraph tags. So P tag, in which will show the movie.release date. And then I'll do option shift down arrow. I'll copy that down, and we'll set this to be movie.vote average to kind of see the ratings. And I'll do option shift down arrow to do it one more time. And then we'll do movie.vote count to show them the amount of votes that they have. And the movie average here is going to be out of 10 is what it's going to be, I believe. So I'm going to do /10. And then below this div, we'll just do a button in which onClick is going to call the onClose function, and it's just going to say close. So that's really all our modal is going to be. It's going to pop out here, and it's going to show the movie title, the movie overview, release date, and then some different ratings. But now the biggest thing is probably adding the styles here, which I'm going to copy and paste now from my GitHub. You can do so as well, or like I said, you can style this yourself or use ChatGPT to do so. So I'm going to copy these in here. So I now have added all these styles. You can also pause this video right now. I'll show everything. So you could pause this and also just type them in if you want, but I think it'd be so much easier to go to my GitHub, go to this modal.jsx component and paste this in yourself as well. But now let's head back to my page.jsx page. And here we need to kind of handle the logic from my modal. So when we render this out, we're going to want to render the modal here that we just created. So import that, but we need to also add a movie. And what is this movie going to be? Well, when they select a movie, we want it to be that movie. So we need to have some state that says the selected movie. So I'm going to say selected movie is what the movie is going to be. So we need to implement that logic as well. So I'm going to say const selected movie, comma, set selected movie is equal to use state. And then we are going to initialize that to be null. But then we need to create a handle movie click function that is going to set the selected movie. So I'm going to say function handle movie click. And then what it's going to do is it's going to set the selected movie, and it's going to be the movie that we accept in this handle movie click function. But now we need to actually go implement this handle movie click function. However, if you remember in our movie grid, we just pass in null here. But this is where we should actually pass in our handle movie click function. And then within our grid, let's go into our movie grid. We pass in our handle movie click function to our movie card. So let's command click on movie card. And we have our on click here. And then we set our on click to be the on click, but we actually need to pass in the movie here to our on click function, because in our page, it expects to receive a movie right here. So let's go ahead and just pass in an inline function here in which we call the on click with the movie. So every movie card is going to be wrapped with this div where when you click on this wrapper, it's going to pass in this movie that is going to pass it to this handle click in our movie grid, which is going to pass it to this handle movie click that we pass in to our movie grid here. And it's going to contain the movie for every movie card. And it's going to set the selected movie to this selected movie state. And then once we have that in our selected movie state, with our modal, we have our movie here, so we can render it out with the additional details within our modal. But we also need to implement this on close function. So here, if I come back, we can do function handle close modal. And then all we're going to do here is set selected movie back to null. Because if there's not a movie, then within our modal, we return null. So we don't use this at all. But within our modal, we need to add a on close function that is handle close modal. So we just created this modal in which our movie is going to be a selected movie that is going to be the movie that they click on for a movie card. And then on close is going to be handle close modal that sets the movie to null. And in our modal, if there's not a movie, it's just going to return null here. So if I didn't mess anything up, which as you've already seen is not always the case, then I should be able to search movies here. Let's do John Wick again. I click search. I see these movies, but now when I click on one of these movies, I should be able to see a modal pop up with additional details. So if I click on John Wick Chapter 4, you see I get this kind of nicely styled modal, at least I think it looks decent, in which it has the overview of the movie, the release date, as well as the rating out of 10, and a vote count here. And it should work. John Wick Chapter 2, John Wick 3, and so on and so forth. Man, this came out almost 10 years ago, was the first John Wick. Cool. So it looks like everything is indeed working here. Let's search for a different movie. Let's do, I don't know, Die Hard. I'll search that. We see the different Die Hard movies. And we can click and see all these different modals here. So this looks pretty good. And as you can see, we see our truncated movie title here with a ... So yeah, this is a interesting movie here. But I'll move forward though. Everything looks pretty dang good here. But now what we need to implement is our other pages that are going to show us the upcoming movies, the now playing movies, top rated movies, popular movies. So we need to implement this menu bar over here that is going to navigate to those different pages. So let's go ahead and do that now. And moving back here to VS Code, I did notice one issue in which within my movie card component here, the class name, I accidentally put rounder MD and it should be a rounded MD. So just a slightly different style for the image where it has kind of rounded off image corners rather than completely squared off. So other than that, I think we're good to move to the sidebar component. So over here in components, we're going to do new file and I'm going to do sidebar.jsx. And this is going to be a client component because they are going to be opening and closing the sidebar, and we are going to be handling a little bit of state here as well. So use client at the top of the file, and then we are also going to set a constant here that are going to be our navigation items. So I'm going to say const nav items is equal to an array, and every item in this array is going to be an object that has an href as well as a title. So this is going to allow the user to navigate to our now playing page, our popular movies, our top rated, our upcoming movies, as well as our home page. So they're all going to have those titles, and then they're also going to have a path that we are going to set as a link or the href of that link. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to pass in an object, which has an href property. Our first property is just going to be to our home route, and then the title is just going to be home. And then I'm going to put another object in here, so comma, and then open up another object. And instead of actually doing that, let's actually just copy this down. So Option Shift down arrow. So now we're going to do an href of, let's do now hyphen playing. And then we're going to do the title as now playing. Copy this down again with Option Shift down arrow. And then this one is going to be popular. And then we're going to change the title to popular. And then we're going to Option Shift down arrow. And then this is going to be top rated. And then the title is going to be top rated, Option Shift down arrow. And then the last one is going to be upcoming. And then the title is going to be upcoming. So we're creating this array of items. And this is going to allow us to map over these items to create our different links that we want to have in our sidebar. So now we're going to create our sidebar. So export default function sidebar. And we are going to have some state here. So we're going to have const is open, comma set is open is equal to use state, and then import that from React. And then we're going to initialize that to false. And then here we're going to have a function called close sidebar, and it's just going to be set is open to false. And let's move this down just a little bit more here. In our return statement, we're going to do a wrapper React fragment here. So we want to just create a wrapper, but we don't really want to generate HTML with this. So we're using a React fragment. this would be the same thing as using a component that just says react.fragment. So we have this in place, and then the first thing that we're going to do is create a button. And then this button is going to be, well, it's going to have dynamic text. So we're going to say, if this sidebar is open, question mark, then the text is just going to be an X. Because if it's open, then we want to put an X so they can close the sidebar. But if it's not open, then we want the text to actually just say menu. And then below this button, this is where we're going to map over our nav items. So we're going to do nav items dot map, and it's going to accept an item. And then we're going to return. So parentheses return. So I'm going to do an implicit return here, and I'll scroll down. And we're going to render out a Next.js link component. So import link from next link up above here. And this link component, we're going to set a key to item.href because it needs to be a unique key since we're mapping over a list of items, just like regular React. And then the on click, well, when they click on a nav item to navigate to a different page, we actually want to close the sidebar. So we're going to close the sidebar on click. We're going to set the href. That's going to equal item.href. Now let me close this link. And then as the text, it's going to be item.title. So we're going to map over this and then generate these nav items. But what I actually want to do here is before kind of this mapping here, I want to do actually some logic in which I'm going to do is open. So check if the sidebar is open, and then we want to return. And what we're going to return is actually a wrapper div, and then within that a wrapper nav, and then this is where I want to render my nav items that I'm going to map over. So we're going to move this Command X, and then I'm going to Command V within my nav element here. And then I'll move all this together. So sorry, I kind of did that backwards there, but we only want to render our nav bar if our state is open. So if it's open, then we want to return this nav bar component that is going to have a wrapper div. And then within that div, we're going to have a nav. And then that's where we map over our nav item. And then that is it for the HTML here, but we do need to style this. So I'm going to copy and paste my styles in here, and you can do the same from my GitHub. So now I have the styles pasted in here. So we still have the button up top that is going to open and close the sidebar. And then I'm not sure, I think I kind of forgot to put the on click to the button. So basically when they click on this button, we want to make sure that we just set is open to not is open. So if the sidebar is already closed, then it's going to open the sidebar. It's going to set it to true. But if it's already true, it's going to set it to false. So make sure that you put that on click on your button, as well as we put the styles here. And then we just added a class name to the div here, class name to the nav element. We map over all the nav items, and then we render this link that still has the item.href, close sidebar on click, and then we added the class name here and then render the item.title. So everything else is the same. Just make sure you have that on click added right here. Now that we have this in place, where I actually want to render this is within my layout component within the root of my application, because I'm always going to want to show this sidebar on every page within my app. So I'm going to render it right here within my root layout above my children. I'm going to render my sidebar component. So we now have that in place here, and I imported that from components sidebar. So if we come back to the app, I should see, and I do see, this menu up top here. If I click on it, it opens this sidebar, and you see we have some OK styling here as well, to where we see home, now playing, popular, top rated, and upcoming. And I can close it, open it, and everything is working here for the navigation of our site. So now the user can actually go to different pages. But the only page that we've implemented is this home page, which I click on this and it does close the sidebar, which is good. But now we need to implement these next 4 pages here. Now, luckily, this won't actually take us very long because we already have implemented the React components of a movie grid as well as the movie card. And basically, we just need to make a fetch request for this data and then render out our movie grid for these different 4 pages. So this should be somewhat straightforward to do here. So what we'll do first is, what's the first item? Now playing. Let's go ahead and implement that here. So what we're going to do is, we're first within my app folder, I'm going to create a new folder called now-playing. Now make sure that this title matches what we put in our href right here, because this href is going to navigate this link to now-playing. So our folder needs to be called now-playing, because once we add a page.js file within now-playing, that is going to add a public route to now-playing. Okay, so make sure that this is indeed now-playing and it matches the nav items. But what we'll do is, to make this a public route, and Next.js does this automatically with its file-based routing system, is I'm going to add a page.jsx file within now-playing. So whatever I return from this page.jsx file is what the user is going to see when they navigate to now-playing. Now, this is also going to be a client component here. And the main reason for that is actually going to be that we are going to have some handle opening and closing the modal and handle some movie state here. So we're going to do that. You could probably do this in a way in which we did make this entire thing a client component, which generally is not a bad idea. But for our application, we're not going to run into any performance issues by making this a client component. So we're going to just do use client here. For this component, we're going to export a default function called now playing. And then what we need to do is, we need to make a request to our API at the mounting of this component and receive all of our movie data. Then we need to set our movie state to that movie data, and then return a movie grid based on those movies. So what we're going to do is set const movies, set movies is equal to use state, and I'll initialize it to an empty array. And we need to also make sure to import use state from React. So we're going to do that there. Now, below this, we're also going to use a useEffect hook to make this fetch request when this component mounts. So I'm going to do useEffect, and I'm going to import that from React. I'm going to call it, and I'm going to pass it in a function, an anonymous function. And then here is where we're going to make our fetch request. Now, the URL to this is going to be our base URL as well as our API key, but it's going to be at a different URL than what we did our movie search. So I'm going to do backticks, $, curly brace, and I'm going to do base URL, and I'm going to import that from constant. And then I'm going to do /movie/, and this is going to be now _playing. And then I'm going to do a question mark, and I'm going to set my API underscore key is going to equal $, curly brace, process.env.next public API key. So base URL, movie, now playing, question mark, API underscore key, and then our .env next public API key. And then once I make this request, I want to then get the response and return my response.json. And then once that occurs, I need to then, because response.json is asynchronous. I need to get the data, and I want to set my movies to my data.results. And then if that fails, I need to make sure to catch the error, and I'll console.error, and I'll say error fetching movies in now playing. And then I will show my error here as well. And maybe I'll even do something like that to make it look a little bit better formatted. And then for this use effect, we only want to call this when our component mounts. So as the second argument to the use effect hook, we pass in an empty array. So we only run this function on mount. And then from here, we can just return out our HTML. So we're going to do wrapper div, and then we're going to do a main tag, and then we're going to do an h1, and that's just going to say now playing. And then we're also going to render our movie grid, importing that from components movie grid. We're going to set our movies. That's going to be equal to our movies. Now we're also going to have a handle movie click, which we're eventually going to create a handle movie click function, which we'll do in a second. And then I'm going to close this component. We're also going to want to render out our modal component and show a modal for when they click on a movie. And this handle movie click, well, that should open up our modal when they click on a movie. So let's create some different state here. So what I want to do is say const selected movie, set selected movie is equal to use state, and then I'm going to initialize that to null. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, if there is a selected movie, I want to render out my modal, and I'll set a movie to the selected movie, and I'll set the onClose to a handle close modal function. So we'll create handle close modal, and all we'll do is set selected movie back to null. Now, we also want to handle movie click, and on handle movie click, we want to set the selected movie to whatever movie is passed into the handle movie click. So we'll do function handle movie click. It's going to accept a movie. And then we want to set the selected movie to the movie. And then we'll pass it into our movie grid. And then below our movie grid, we will say curly braces to enter JavaScript land. And then we'll say selected movie, ampersand, ampersand. So if there is a selected movie, then render out our modal, importing it from components, modal, up top here. And then our modal, we're going to set our movie is going to equal our selected movie. And then on close is going to equal our handle close modal function. And then we will close our modal there. And then this should get all of our data here and then render out a movie grid as well as a modal with our movie. Now I am going to add just a few styles here. So to this div, I'm going to paste these styles from my GitHub. I'm going to do the same thing for my main tag here from my GitHub, which you can do as well, linked in the description. And then I'll do the same thing for this H1 component for now playing. But then with this in place, we should be able to now navigate to now-playing and see our movies. And that also assumes that I didn't make any errors with this use effect and fetching this data. So let's come back here. I'm going to refresh for good measure. I'm going to click menu and let's go to now playing. And we do indeed see all of our now playing movies. So apparently these are now playing movies, unless these are like older movies. Is there a new Expendables that is out? Oh, let me click on it and see. So it looks like the release date is 2023, 9/15. I'm recording this in November, so this isn't too far off. So yeah, this looks pretty good. And as you can see, our modals are indeed working here. So now you can go to the now playing page as well as our homepage to search for different movies. And I said John movies, I meant to do John Wick. So we've implemented searching for movies, and you can see these movie cards are now a little bit more rounded off. And now we can go to now playing, but we also want to do popular, top rated, and upcoming. Now, this is going to be very similar to what we've already done here for Now Playing. Go ahead and try to implement those other pages. It's going to be basically this component here with just some slight tweaks. So go implement that, and then I will see you on the other side. So now I'm going to go and do this as well. So what was the next one? Popular. So all we're going to do, create a new folder. This is going to be a popular dot. No, wait, it's just going to be popular. But then within popular folder, we're going to create a page.jsx to create a public route at popular. And then within Now Playing, I'm going to just copy this entire file. And then I'm going to paste it in to my popular file. But here, we're going to export default function popular. We're still going to have set movies and the set selected movies. But instead of Now Playing, this is going to be /popular. And then we're going to change this air to popular. And then we're going to change Now Playing to popular as well. And really, I think those are the only changes that I need to make here. So let's come back and let's go to popular. And I see these popular movies. So we see Oppenheimer, Mission Impossible, and different movies that are popular. Fast X, I didn't even know that they made another Fast and the Furious. I guess I should just assume at this point, ooh, I really do want to see Equalizer 3. I like Denzel. But yeah, look how easy it was for us to implement popular now that we have the basic structure. So now let's go implement top rated and upcoming as well. So very similar process. Within app, new folder, it's going to be top -rated. And then I am going to create a page.jsx file. I'm going to command V, and then I'm going to call this top rated. And then this is going to be top_rated. And I'm going to change this to top rated. And I need to change the title to top rated. So now if we go back quick, let's go to our menu, go to top rated, and we see our top rated movies. The Godfather, Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, I got some solid movies in here as well. And then for the final item, it is going to be upcoming movies. So let's come back. Let's do the same thing. New folder, upcoming, and then I'll do a page.jsx to make a public route. Command V, change this to upcoming, and then we'll change this to upcoming movies and change this to upcoming movies. And I know we are kind of repeating some kind of HTML as well as logic here because we're only making a few changes. So you could, as an exercise for you, you can make one single component, maybe called like movie page grid or something, and just kind of render out most of this logic here and most of this state, and then dynamically input this URL here, this error message here, as well as this title. And that's basically going to get you everything that you need here to make this just a component rather than repeating ourselves across these different pages. So I'll leave that as an exercise for you. I'm okay with repeating some stuff every now and then, especially for like just an application like we have here. Definitely in a large scale application, you'd probably want to componentize this a little bit better than what we've done here. But now if I come back, I should be able to then go to upcoming, and I do indeed see these movies here as well. So with that, we have now completed. We have our homepage here to where we can search, and we have all of our different pages here. So the very last step is deploying this website. So let's go over to GitHub here. So I'm on my github.com and I've logged in and I'm just like at my dashboard here. I'm going to do create new repository, and I will call this Movie Explorer. And then I'm going to create a repository, and then I'm going to copy this git remote add origin and this URL. within my project here, I'm going to do git add, git commit, -m, add project. And I realize I spelled project wrong. But then I'm going to do git remote add origin, git push, and get an error. But then I'm going to copy and paste this suggestion from the arrow setting upstream origin main, paste that in. And we should now have our project within our GitHub application, which we do indeed do. So now to deploy this, I'm going to head over to Vercel. So I'm over here at Vercel, so vercel.com. And if you don't have an account, you can create a free Vercel account. And then also, you should have prompts to connect your Vercel account to your GitHub. It is super easy to do. Just try to connect your Vercel account here to GitHub. And then once you do that, click on this triangle icon to head to your overview page. And then all we're going to do is add new here, new project, and then I'm importing Git repository. And then we're going to do Movie Explorer. So I'm going to import that here. Now we do need to add an environment variable here. So this is going to be, if we come back and I open my .env.local, we're going to copy our next public API key. So go ahead and enter your env.local, copy that key, and I'll show you what to do with it within Vercel. So here, our key is going to be called next public API key. And then here, I'm going to paste the value of my key. I'm going to click add. And then once that is added, I'm going to click deploy. So go ahead and follow those steps. I'm not going to show it just so I don't need to blur anything out here. So now my project is being deployed. This will just take a couple of seconds, and then I'll check in once it's done deploying. And we now get a message saying, congratulations, you just deployed a new project to Vercel. So if I click on this image here, it should take me to my deployed website. So it's at movie-explorer vercel.app. Now you could add a custom domain, but this is totally free and it gives us a public domain here. So we have our Movie Explorer. Let's try to use it here. Let's do John Wick, click search, and I see my different movies. I click on a movie, I see John Wick, the modals here look good. I have my menu up top. Let's go to now playing. Looks like it works. Let's go to top rated. Looks like it works. Let's click on it. It looks like everything here is working in our deployed website. So thank you so much for checking this out. In about just an hour here, we built what I think is a pretty cool application. Now, I think that this could standalone be a project that you have for like a portfolio or something like that. But I think it would also be cool if you extended this. And I would definitely recommend extending this project if you're going to use it as a portfolio project, just because I think it's generally just ethically correct to at least have your projects be something that you built and that you extended on and stuff like that. So to extend this, you could definitely watch my Supabase authentication tutorials and add some sort of authentication here. So maybe in this menu, add the ability for a user to sign in. And then you could also add the ability for them to save movies. So once they can sign in, then maybe add the ability for them to save movies using a Supabase database, which I have videos on as well. But that's probably the next steps I would take to kind of extend this, which I would definitely do if I were you, to actually make this something that you could add to your portfolio of projects. But like I said, thanks for tuning into this. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot from it, and I will see you in that next one.